In this video, I will show you how you can build a octagon-shaped drop ceiling. So this would be a ceiling with an octagon drop ceiling in the center of the room, or should I say centered in the room. And the first thing I want to do is start with a layout plan. And sometimes you won't need to do much work because you're going to be working with a reflected ceiling plan that you're going to have on your building blueprints. However, don't worry if you don't have any blueprints. I will also be providing you with a method you can use if you don't have any blueprints. And we're going to be starting with an 8-foot square. And this is usually the easiest method for me. You might have another method, and if that's the case, stop watching this video and feel free to share it with us in the comment area. But this is about the easiest way I have found. And I would also like to point out that these measurements are incorrect. And I didn't notice it until I got a little further into the drawing. This should actually be 44.5 inches instead of 44 and 13/16. So it messed me up a little bit, which tells me that I shouldn't be relying totally on all measurements from a computer generated model, and neither should you. So let's go ahead and start with the band we're going to nail around the perimeter up against the walls. And since our ceiling is only going to be dropping 5.5 inches, we're going to nail it tight to the ceiling and tight to the wall framing. And it looks something like this. And of course, we won't need to put any fire blocking in here because the framing plates will now be our fire blocking. And again, this measurement is 3 foot 8.5 inches, but you should be able to get to the general message here that you will be centering a measurement, and that measurement is going to be 8 feet. So you can easily go from the center of the room, transfer a mark up, or do all of your layout on the floor, and then once you have a center mark, go 4 foot in each direction, and that will give you an 8-foot opening in the center. The next step will be to install the double joist, and you can install a single joist here and build it a little differently, but I'm going to just go ahead and use a double joist. And again, it's going to be 3 foot 8.5 inches. And then after you have installed these double joists, we need to figure out the position of our other double joist. And again, this measurement here is going to be 3 foot 8.5 inches overall from the wall framing, or should I say the face of the wall framing or the edge of the ceiling, and the outside measurement for our double joist we're going to install. Again, this won't be difficult. You're simply going to be centering an 8-foot opening in here, and you can do that by measuring the overall distance of the area between the wall framing and simply divide that by 2 to get the center. Then you can position the double joist we're going to use in here, and if you haven't done so by now, make sure that you check the opening to make sure that we have 8 foot in between these two boards here and in between these two boards here in the clear inside. And if you're off by 1/4 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch, that might not be a big deal. And of course, you can use hangers, and most people will for something like this. And hangers might also be required by the building plans. However, you can always use pressure blocks, and a pressure block is just going to be a block nailed between the joist. And you can just nail the block to the rim joist here and then toe nail the 2x4s or 2x6, whatever you want to use, into the rim joist. And a 2x4 usually requires 2 angled nails, where a 2x6 might require 3. So you can see here where we have this pressure blocked and the joists are 16 inches on center, except for on these joists here, I didn't pressure block them, and I went ahead and put 2 nails on one side and 1 nail on the other side. And this is another common practice I've used for a long time. But again, today this might not be acceptable because of the overkill building code requirements for stuff like this. And of course, now would be a good time to point out that I am not a structural engineer, and that you might need to check with local building authorities or your local building department to verify whether or not you can use the construction methods in this video. In the next step, we will calculate create the octagon opening. And since I have already made a video on that, I will just put a link here so that you can go to the video. So let's go ahead and pretend like we have figured everything out and we have our measurement. And our measurement is going to be 3 foot 3 3/4 inches or 39 3/4 inches. And again, not too difficult. We're simply going to center this measurement in our 8-foot opening. And now would also be a good time to point out that your measurements are going to be different if you're going to be using different sized openings. However, if you are going to build one that's going to be 8 foot by 8 foot, then you can use these same measurements. And of course, once we have this measurement, we will simply transfer it to the other sides of the opening, or at least the other 3 sides of the opening. And that is probably going to be it for any type of math or level of difficulty in doing any calculations. Because now all you're going to need to do will be to cut a board that's going to be from long point to long point, 39 3/4 inches, and of course you will have a 45-degree angle on both ends. And as far as the joist here, it can run in either direction. It can run from this side or it can run from this side, or you could even run it from both sides if you needed to. And of course I'm providing you with an example of the nailing, and you can always pressure block this, use a hanger, or toe nail it. And then you're going to end nail it in through the rim here. And of course the 45-degree angle will be nailed also like that. And then you will repeat the process on the other 3 corners. So not too difficult to come up with a perfect octagon. And now let's see what it will look like with our support blocks and how the support blocks are going to be nailed to the floor joist. So here we have a 2x4, and I wouldn't recommend making them tight to the top of the joist or even with the bottom of the ceiling framing. Maybe give yourself a 1/4 inch gap. And of course, these support blocks will be nailed into the other framing components, like the double joist here. And you're simply going to end nail the joist into the block. And these blocks work great for adding support to hanging ceilings, drop ceilings like we're building here. And here's another example where you might need to add some type of a spacer block to be even with the floor joist and the ceiling joist or other framing components you're going to be working with. And of course, you can space these blocks out to wherever you think they're going to be needed on your project, and even rotate them if they're going to work better in this direction than it will be in this direction. Again, there's no exact science to this unless you're working with a set of plans provided by an engineer. And I would find it hard to believe that an engineer would provide all the detail that a carpenter would need to assemble something like this. And the last thing I want to point out in the video is that you might need some drywall backing like we put in here. And you can see here where we have it on this side, but we don't need it on the other side because the floor joist will provide us with our drywall backing. And by now you should have a pretty good idea how to do all of the calculations necessary to frame a drop ceiling with an octagon in the center of it. Now, if you enjoyed the video and learned something from it, or learned something from it but didn't enjoy the video, then feel free to let us know by hitting the thumbs up or the like button.